On the late evening of March 9, 1945, precisely at 11:47 p.m., Lieutenant Hiroshi Nakamura expertly pushed his Nakajima Ki-84 fighter aircraft to its maximum possible climb rate as he surged over the waters of Tokyo Bay. The radio in his cockpit crackled with the urgent, flickering commands coming from ground control, warning him of the approaching threat. 300 American B-29 Superfortress bombers advancing from the south at an altitude of approximately 7,000 feet, traveling at roughly 230 miles per hour. He had approximately 15 minutes before the enemy formation entered his engagement range. Over the course of his military career, Hiroshi had flown 42 combat missions specifically aimed against American bombers, and he was well aware of the formidable reputation these aircraft had earned. The B-29 was widely regarded among Japanese pilots as an unstoppable fortress in the skies, by many accounts, invincible and virtually impenetrable bomber. Yet, tonight, there was a noticeable shift in their approach. The Americans seemed to be flying significantly lower than in any previous raid, pushing beneath the altitude limits that Japanese fighters normally operated at, plunging into depths that had remained elusive until now. For the first time in months, Hiroshi saw within his reach the possibility of approaching close enough to open fire with his weapons. Unbeknownst to him at that moment, the revelations awaiting him would fundamentally explain why, despite their resilience and effort, Japanese fighter squadrons were steadily losing the air war over their homeland. By the early months of 1945, the progression of the strategic bombing campaign against Japan had reached a pivotal historical turning point. The United States had established control over critical island territories such as the Mariana Islands, Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. From these bases, the formidable B-29 Superfortress could strike targets deep within Japan, with Tokyo itself now within the bomber's impressive reach. The B-29 represented a quantum leap in aerial technology, an aircraft that Japan could not yet hope to match. It boasted a maximum speed of approximately 357 miles per hour, a service ceiling reaching just under 31,850 feet, and an operational range of about 3,250 miles. Its bomb payload was capable of carrying 20,000 pounds of explosive, enough to cause widespread destruction. Yet, what truly distinguished the B-29 from its predecessors was not merely its size or its range, though these were remarkable, but its revolutionary defensive armament system that profoundly changed aerial combat. In previous American bombers, such as the B-7 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberator, protection relied heavily on manned gun turrets. Gunners sat exposed in cramped, uncomfortable stations, manually aiming and firing 50-caliber machine guns at attacking enemy fighters. While these systems provided a certain measure of defense, they came with significant limitations. Each gunner could only cover a specific sector of the bomber's circumference, making coordinated defensive fire difficult. Furthermore, at high altitude, gunners faced harsh conditions, freezing temperatures, hypoxia due to altitude, and extreme fatigue, all of which reduced their effectiveness over time. The arrival of the B-29 introduced a profound shift. Its defensive system was vastly more advanced, designed to counter the threats from attacking fighters more effectively than any earlier aircraft. Lieutenant Hiroshi Nakamura was about to find out firsthand just how transformational this new technology was. Hiroshi had joined the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force in 1942, initially undergoing training on the Nakajima Ki-43 Hayabusa fighter, a craft noted for its agility and speed. By the year 1945, he had transitioned into flying the Ki-84 Hate, which was among Japan's most advanced fighters available at the time. The Ki-84 was capable of matching the Americans' P-51 Mustangs in both speed and maneuverability and was engineered to intercept and destroy large bombers, such as the B-29. Its technical specifications were impressive, a maximum speed approaching 392 miles per hour, a service ceiling of over 34,450 feet, and armed with two 20mm cannons along with two 12.7mm machine guns. On paper, these figures suggested that the Ki-84 should be able to intercept B-29s at any altitude they operated within. However, the reality of war often by no means aligned with the detailed predictions and specifications that appeared in official documents. By March of 1945, Japan's overall aerial defense system was crumbling under the weight of numerous challenges. Fuel shortages had severely limited the number of training flights remaining for pilots. Many experienced veterans had either been killed in combat or reassigned to other duties far from the front lines. The maintenance crews faced their own hardships, suffering from shortages of spare parts and worn-out machinery that could not be adequately repaired. Additionally, many key 84 fighters failed to reach their full-rated performance, primarily because of the poor quality of fuel available and the deteriorated condition of their engines. Hiroshi's squadron, the 47th Sentai, based at Naramesu Airfield located northwest of Tokyo, had initially begun the war with a fleet of 36 aircraft. By that late stage of the conflict, only 14 remained operational, and of those, merely 8 were flown by pilots with significant combat experience. In response to the relentless threat posed by the B-29s, Japanese fighter tactics had been forced to evolve through a brutal process of trial and error. Early attempts to confront the enemy with straightforward tail attacks, an often recommended tactic, had frequently resulted in catastrophic losses, as attacking fighters were met with overwhelming defensive firepower and coordinated fighter defenses. The ongoing struggle to develop effective interception strategies was marked by repeated failures and painful lessons, underscoring just how formidable the American bomber and its accompanying defenses had become at this late stage of the war. The tail guns of the B-29 were capable of engaging enemy targets at distances reaching up to 1,000 yards. Attacks launched from the side, from a beam position, proved to be largely ineffective, as the aircraft's defenses and the speed of the turreted guns made it impossible for a pilot to stay on target. Conversely, the remote turrets, which were designed to track and fire rapidly, often responded with such speed that intercepting them in a narrow window of opportunity seemed almost impossible. The most promising approach remained a direct, head-on assault, which, although fraught with danger, offered the best chance of successfully damaging or destroying the bomber. Achieving this, however, required exceptional precision, flawless timing, and nerves of steel, as any miscalculation could result in disaster. Hiroshi had attempted such head-on attacks 3 times during previous missions. Each time, his efforts were thwarted, as the B-29's defensive firepower drove him off before he could reach effective engagement range. It seemed that even before he had begun his attack run, the Japanese fighter's guns would instinctively track and target him, as if sensing his intentions. The tracers from the American bomber's guns streaked through the air from multiple directions simultaneously, creating a chaotic, overwhelming curtain of fire that he could hardly evade. Despite the intensity of these encounters, Hiroshi was undeterred, but that night marked a different story entirely. On this particular evening, the American planes flew considerably lower, at an altitude of only 7,000 feet, less than a quarter of their usual bombing height. This lower altitude meant that the Japanese fighters could operate more effectively, maintaining their speed and maneuverability with less difficulty. It also granted Hiroshi and his comrades more time to line up their attack runs, a critical advantage in the deadly game of aerial combat. As Hiroshi's key fighter, the 843rd, climbed steadily through the 5,000-foot level, he carefully checked his ammunition supplies. His aircraft was loaded with 120 rounds for each of the 20mm cannons, and found 350 rounds for his machine guns. This amounted to enough firepower for perhaps 2 or 3 attack passes if he were lucky. Yet, he had no illusions. He understood that he might not get the chance to spend all of his ammunition before the opportunity was lost. At exactly 11:58 in the evening, Hiroshi's sharp eyes spotted the first formation of B-29s. They appeared as faint, dark silhouettes against the brighter, illuminated sky, flying in loose but purposeful formation at the altitude of 7,000 feet. From his vantage point, Hiroshi counted roughly 30 bombers in the initial wave, with more following in behind them. The entire formation stretched for miles across the sky, a formidable and intimidating line of enemy aircraft. Ground control had guided him meticulously to the lead elements of this formation, and the orders were crystal clear: attack from the front, targeting the cockpit and engine nacelles of the aircraft. His instructions emphasized that he should break away and retreat before reaching the minimum safe distance, standard early war tactics designed to minimize risks from the bomber's guns. Positioning himself, more precisely, the 843rd, several miles ahead of the advancing formation, Hiroshi climbed further to 8,000 feet to gain a slight altitude advantage. He had a plan: to dive through the enemy formation, fire a burst of gunfire at the lead bomber, and then pull up sharply, retreating before the B-29's defensive guns could track and lock onto him. This maneuver, which he had practiced countless times in training, had proven effective. Approaching within 1 mile of the target, Hiroshi inverted his fighter and pulled into a steep dive, bringing his speed up to approximately 400 miles per hour, a blistering pace in the air. The lead B-29 loomed larger in his gun sight as he pressed the firing button. His 20mm cannons roared to life, evoking a thunderous response as shells erupted toward the bomber's cockpit area. Tracers streaked through the night sky like fiery lines of death, arching toward their target with deadly precision. Yet, in a moment that Hiroshi would never forget, something unprecedented occurred. Instead of the expected return fire from the tail guns or waist positions, the usual point defenses, the B-29's defensive guns opened fire from all directions simultaneously. It was as if the bomber's entire defensive system had come alive at once. Tracer rounds converged on Hiroshi's fighter from above, below, and all around him, creating a deadly crossfire. The volume of fire was 3 times greater than any he had encountered during past missions, and he knew intuitively that he was in extreme danger. His escape route was narrow, but Hiroshi reacted instantly. He broke sharply to the left, pulling a high 6Gs in a desperate attempt to evade the onslaught. As he executed the evasive turn, he could hear impacts, metallic clangs and rattles, as 50 caliber rounds struck his aircraft's tail and left wing, making the situation even more perilous. Inside the cockpit, the air filled with the acrid smell of cordite from the gunfire and hydraulic fluid from damaged lines. Hiroshi realized that he had been in the effective firing range for less than 3 seconds. Yet within that brief interval, the B-29 had unleashed a barrage of more rounds than an entire squadron of enemy fighters might fire in a single engagement. The predatory silence that followed was deafening. Hiroshi knew he had been tested to his limits. Every second seemed stretched, yet he had only just escaped with his life. The intense, deadly dance of aerial combat underscored the brutal reality of war at its most ferocious. As Hiroshi gradually withdrew, ascending once more to his attack altitude, he suddenly became acutely aware that there was something fundamentally different about the defensive system employed by the B-29 Superfortress. It was immediately clear that the gun emplacements were tracking him even before he managed to open fire. The defensive weapons had engaged him from multiple positions simultaneously, coordinating their fire in perfect harmony. Despite his evasive maneuvers, the guns continued to follow his aircraft with an almost unnatural precision, making it obvious that this was no ordinary anti-aircraft defense. What he was witnessing was something altogether different, a highly advanced, computerized system at work. Hiroshi circled at an altitude of around 10,000 feet, observing other Japanese fighters attempt their own attacks against the formidable bomber. Each attempt followed the same pattern: a brief burst of cannon fire, quickly followed by an overwhelming barrage of defensive fire emanating from multiple turrets atop the B-29, which forced the attacking fighters to break away or evade defeat. Among these fighters, a Ki-84, flown by Sergeant Tanaka, pressed his attack too aggressively, closing too close to the target. Hiroshi saw in real time as tracers from 3 distinct B-29 turrets converged on Tanaka's fighter with deadly intent. The fighter suddenly exploded in midair, torn apart by concentrated fire from the aircraft's 50 caliber guns. At that moment, Hiroshi understood the nature of the B-29's defenses. The guns were not being aimed individually by separate gunners. They were being operated by a central control system that synchronized all the defensive positions. When one gunner acquired a target using his sight, the entire network of turrets would automatically track and fire on the same enemy aircraft. The system calculated lead angles and firing solutions with astonishing speed, outpacing what any human gunner could possibly achieve. This realization explained everything. The seemingly impossible speed with which the guns tracked enemy fighters, the coordinated fire from multiple directions, and the unerring accuracy, even at long ranges. The B-29's defenses were not merely dependent on human operators behind the guns. Instead, they relied on an advanced computer network. Despite Japanese intelligence reports indicating that American bombers used remotely operated turrets, which was understood in broad terms, no one had yet fully grasped what that truly entailed in practice. Now, Hiroshi saw clearly. The gunners were seated inside the pressurized fuselage of the aircraft, operating sighting stations connected to unmanned, remote-controlled turrets mounted around the exterior of the bomber. These operators were shielded from the elements, not exposed to weather or enemy fire. Because of this arrangement, the gunners weren't physically limited by their position or exposed to danger. Moreover, they could control multiple turrets at the same time, allowing for rapid responses and comprehensive coverage. This system afforded American gunners three critical advantages. First was enhanced visibility. The gunners used optical sights equipped with magnification, enabling them to detect and acquire targets at much longer distances than Japanese pilots could manage with their own gun sights. While Japanese fighters relied on their own visual range and personal gun sights, the B-29's gunners could engage enemies from over 1,000 yards away, far beyond the effective range of the Japanese 20mm cannons. Second was the advantage of coordination. The fire control officer, often the upper turret gunner, could direct all the remote turrets to focus on specific targets, prioritizing threats as they appeared. If a fighter dived in from the front, both forward-positioned turrets would automatically lock onto it. If the fighter broke away or maneuvered to evade, the rear turrets would seamlessly adjust to take over the engagement. This meant there were no gaps in coverage, and the defenses were always on alert from multiple angles, creating a cohesive, all-encompassing defensive network. Third, and perhaps most impressive, was the computational accuracy of the system. The analog fire control computers fed ballistic data into their calculations, taking into account various variables such as target range, relative airspeed, altitude, and the target's angular velocity. These computers automatically corrected for parallax, the discrepancy caused by the difference in position between the gunner's sight and the turret's guns, and also compensated for the bomber's own movement through the air. They then calculated precise lead angles, meaning the direction in which the guns needed to be aimed to compensate for the travel time of the bullets, ensuring that the projectiles would meet their target at the correct point in space. This integrated computer-assisted system transformed what might have been a manually operated defense into an extremely accurate and deadly network. It was an elegant combination of mechanical and electronic calculation, enabling the defenses to operate with a speed and precision impossible for any human gunners alone. Hiroshi's realization illuminated the true sophistication behind the B-29's formidable defenses, revealing that this was no collection of individual skilled marksmen, but rather a unified, highly automated, and incredibly effective aerial defensive system. A single human pilot, relying solely on their own judgment and experience, might attempt to estimate and evaluate various factors and threats during a combat engagement. However, in contrast, the B-29 Superfortresses' advanced onboard computer system performed these calculations with impeccable mathematical accuracy and speed, providing insights that no human could match. Hiroshi, a Japanese fighter pilot, soon came to a stark realization. The traditional tactics employed by Japanese fighters against earlier bombers such as the B-7 and B-24 were now entirely obsolete. Historical combat strategies like head-on assaults, beam attacks from the side, or tail attacks while climbing were based on the assumption that enemy fighters' defenses relied on individual machine gun crews, each with limited fields of fire and manual aiming capabilities. These tactics presupposed that the defending fighters could be approached from angles where the firepower was manageable and predictable. However, against the B-29's sophisticated central fire control system, such methods were essentially suicidal. The B-29's defensive weaponry was automated and highly coordinated, rendering simple manual attacks almost hopeless. Despite this sharp understanding, Hiroshi faced the harsh reality that he could not communicate this strategic insight to other pilots, leaving them vulnerable to the increasingly dangerous and effective defenses of the American bombers. At 1 minute and 14 seconds past midnight, The first wave of B-29s commenced their aerial assault, releasing their dangerous payloads over target territories. But these bombs were not solely traditional high-explosive types intended to inflict damage through blast and fragmentation. Instead, they carried M69 incendiary clusters, each containing 47 6-pound napalm bomblets, meticulously designed to ignite fires that would spread rapidly across Tokyo's predominantly wooden and highly flammable buildings. The cityscape below was instantly transformed into a raging inferno, with flames spreading violently from block to block, from neighborhood to neighborhood. Hiroshi could see the conflagrations expanding, district after district, from his vantage point at high altitude, an unmistakable sign that the Americans' targets were not military installations or strategic assets, but the very heart of the city itself. In a bold attempt to confront these formidable bombardments, Hiroshi pushed his Ki-84 fighter into a steep and daring dive, aiming to approach the dense formation of B-29 bombers from a position beneath and behind them. This approach put him in a dead zone, a blind spot, where the bomber's lower rear turret had limited traverse, making it less capable of tracking him. His plan was to climb swiftly towards the formation, then unleash a burst of fire into the bomber's vulnerable underside, and retreat before the turrets could lock onto his aircraft. It was a desperate and risky maneuver, but Hiroshi knew it was the only chance left that might yield some success amidst overwhelming odds. As he descended to approximately 500 feet below the formation, Hiroshi pulled back on the stick, increasing engine power to maximum. His aircraft, the Ki-84, surged upward, rapidly closing the gap to the nearest B-29. Through his cockpit windows, he could see the bomber's bomb bay doors still open, a clear indication that it had just released its incendiary payload. At a distance of about 300 yards, Hiroshi opened fire, unleashing a withering barrage from his 20mm cannons. Shells struck the fuselage, creating flashes of light upon impact as armor-piercing rounds penetrated the metal structure. Suddenly, the B-29's lower rear turret swung toward him, its guns blazing. Before Hiroshi could fully react, the muzzle flashes of the enemy's machine guns illuminated his aircraft. 50 caliber rounds tore through his left wing, shattering the aileron and puncturing the fuel tank hidden within. The smell of burning aviation gasoline instantly filled his cockpit, signaling imminent danger. In response, Hiroshi instinctively rolled his plane to the right into an inverted position and dove away from the approaching formation, trying to escape the withering fire. His engine sputtered violently, fuel pressure plummeted, and smoke billowed from his left wing, an unmistakable sign of severe damage. His hydraulic system failed completely, leaving vital control surfaces unresponsive. In those critical moments, Hiroshi realized that he had been in effective range for less than 2 seconds, an extremely brief window, and during that fleeting time, the formidable defenses of the B-29's electronic countermeasures and armor had dealt a crippling blow to his fighter. His plane was now severely compromised, and the fight was all but lost. As Hiroshi's damaged aircraft descended toward Naramesu Airfield, struggling to keep airborne amidst the worsening failures, he confronted an unflinching truth that was difficult to accept. Japanese fighters, even when piloted by the most skilled and determined pilots, could not hope to defeat the B-29 in ongoing combat. The combination of current tactics, available technology, and the training and resources at their disposal in March of the year 1945 made victory virtually impossible. The B-29 was not merely a more effective bomber. It represented a colossal technological leap, an order of magnitude beyond what Japanese aviation could counter at that time. Despite his aircraft's grievous damage, Hiroshi managed to bring his crippled Ki-84 safely down onto the runway at Naramesu Airfield, landing at approximately 1:47 in the morning. His aircraft's left wing was shattered, the fuel tank almost drained, and his hydraulic controls completely offline. Ground crews carefully counted a total of 37 bullet holes across the fuselage and wings of his fighter, a testament to the ferocity of the encounter. Hiroshi was fortunate to survive this engagement, being among the relatively few Japanese pilots who returned from such a dangerous and nearly hopeless sortie. Among the 8 critical B-29 aircraft from his squadron that took part in the night assault against the formation that included the formidable B-29 bombers, only 3 managed to return safely to base. Sergeant Tanaka's fighter was tragically destroyed in midair, its explosion serving as a stark reminder of the intense dangers faced during such missions. Lieutenant Yamamoto's aircraft, on the other hand, crashed while approaching the landing strip. The damage sustained during the combat was so severe that he was unable to maintain control. Sergeant Itato, in a desperate bid for survival, bailed out over Tokyo Bay, but despite efforts to locate him afterward, he was never recovered, his fate remaining unknown. 2 additional pilots from the squadron were officially recorded as missing in action. The last reports indicated they were actively pursuing the B-29s toward the coastline, their aircraft either downed or lost during the chaotic flight. Over the span of less than 1.5 hours, the 47th Sentai suffered a staggering loss, 5 fighters and 5 pilots gone, all while they had failed to shoot down any of the enemy bombers. This grim tally made it painfully clear that the raid was a catastrophic failure in terms of aerial combat effectiveness. Despite the high losses on the Japanese side, the intensity and devastation of the attack on Tokyo were immense. Over 334 B-29 Superfortresses participated in the bombing run, each dropping a total of 1,665 tons of incendiary bombs upon the city below. The ensuing firestorm was catastrophic, claiming the lives of an estimated 100,000 civilians and reducing approximately 16 square miles of Tokyo to rubble. To put this into perspective, this destruction was greater than the combined devastation caused by the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki 4 months later. Japanese air defenses managed to shoot down 14 of the attacking B-29 aircraft, which constituted roughly 4% of the bombers involved. However, the toll on Japanese fighters was far more severe. A total of 126 aircraft were lost in combat, representing a loss rate of nearly 9 fighters for each one shot down. This stark disparity illuminated the clear advantage the American forces held. The numbers vividly told the story. The B-29's groundbreaking central fire control system had fundamentally shifted the dynamics of aerial warfare. This advanced system rendered Japanese fighters, which were specifically designed to intercept manned bombers with limited defensive armament, increasingly vulnerable. The computer-controlled turrets, capable of tracking multiple targets simultaneously, greatly amplified the defensive capability of the American bombers, making it nearly impossible for Japanese fighters to succeed against them. In the weeks following the raid on March the 9th, Japanese air commanders tried to adapt through various new tactics. They experimented with night attacks, hoping the darkness would diminish the effectiveness of the B-29's optical sights, which relied heavily on visual targeting during daylight. They also attempted massed formations, aiming to flood the defensive systems with numerous simultaneous attacks, hoping to overwhelm the defenses. Additionally, they resorted to desperate ramming attacks in a last-ditch effort to stop the American bombers. Some tactics drew inspiration from kamikaze methods, originally developed for air-to-air combat, but these efforts proved ineffective. The sophistication of the B-29's fire control system was simply beyond what current Japanese tactics could counter. By August of the same year, the American B-29s had dropped an astonishing cumulative total of 160,000 tons of incendiary and high-explosive bombs on Japanese cities. They operated with virtual impunity, despite the fierce and often desperate resistance mounted by Japanese fighters. The strategic bombing campaign had a devastating toll. It destroyed 67 cities and caused the deaths of an estimated 300,000 civilians. Lieutenant Hiroshi, a survivor of the war, lived to see its end, but his squadron and many others did not fare as well. The central fire control system embedded within the B-29 was among the most significant technological innovations of World War II. Its development, carried out by General Electric between the years 1940 and 1943, brought together a combination of analog computers, remotely controlled turrets, and a coordinated fire control network, establishing a formidable defensive system that revolutionized aerial combat. Although the technology was not flawless, its analog computers sometimes malfunctioned at high altitudes, and the remote turrets occasionally jammed. The system nonetheless provided American bombers with a decisive edge over their Japanese adversaries. Crews often spent hours between missions calibrating sights and testing the fire control circuits, maintaining the system's operational efficiency. Even with these mechanical limitations, the system's overall effectiveness was undeniable, granting the Americans a significant upper hand. The influence of this advanced fire control technology extended beyond the war, shaping the development of modern aviation. Today, contemporary military aircraft, including bombers, fighters, and attack helicopters, rely on computer-assisted targeting systems that are direct descendants of the analog fire control computers pioneered by the B-29. The concept of remote weapon stations, now a common feature on modern unmanned aerial vehicles, has its roots in an earlier technological innovation, the remote turrets of the B-29 Superfortress. This pioneering system not only marked a significant advancement in military aircraft design, but also exemplified a fundamental principle that underpins much of modern warfare technology. In essence, the effectiveness of a weapon system depends far more on how well its components are integrated into a comprehensive, computerized network than on the raw power or caliber of the individual guns themselves. For example, the B-29's 50 caliber machine guns, while formidable, were not inherently more powerful than the Japanese 20mm cannons. Yet, once these weapons were incorporated into a sophisticated, computer-controlled targeting system, they achieved a level of accuracy and efficiency that manual aiming could never match. This integration transformed the weapons into an almost autonomous armament, capable of reacting swiftly and precisely to threats. Japanese aviation engineers were perceptive enough to grasp this critical technological principle during the war. They recognized that the real strength of modern combat aircraft lay in their systems integration rather than solely in the firepower of individual weapons. Unfortunately, by the time Japan was aware of these advancements, the country lacked the necessary industrial capacity, resource base, and time to develop and deploy comparable integrated systems on a large scale. As a result, the technological gap between American and Japanese aviation capabilities widened significantly, rendering Japanese aircraft increasingly vulnerable. Lieutenant Hiroshi's realization on March 9, 1945, that the B-29's defensive systems were controlled by advanced computer technology, which rendered conventional tactics ineffective, arrived too late to alter the course of the air war over Japan. His discovery highlighted a broader, overarching truth about World War II. Victory was not solely dictated by the bravery or tactical ingenuity of soldiers and pilots, but was heavily influenced by technological superiority and industrial strength. The B-29 Superfortress, equipped with its groundbreaking central fire control system, symbolized American technological dominance at its most devastating and sophisticated level. For pilots like Lieutenant Hiroshi, the reality was stark. Their lives were the price paid for the technological divide that their adversaries had established. They faced an enemy equipped with systems that could detect, target, and destroy with unprecedented precision, making their efforts all the more perilous. This stark contrast underscored how technological innovations, combined with industrial capacity, could shape the destiny of nations in wartime. This narrative and analysis form part of the Tales of Valor series, a podcast dedicated to exploring World War II beyond the traditional battlefield stories. In our episodes, we delve into how technological advancement, intelligence, and innovation played crucial roles in determining the outcomes of battles, campaigns, and ultimately, the entire war itself.